Hi, I'm Sydney, and I am a servant of the Almighty God. I am also the author of Humanity's Inflection Point and my latest book, From Whence Cometh Intelligence. This podcast is a continuing of the series on recognizing God's omnipotence. It's also the beginning of the new World Unity podcast. The focus of this podcast is intelligence absolutely cannot occur spontaneously. Intelligence must be built. And this is sort of a culmination, all right? If you have been following any of my podcasts of this being a servant of the Almighty God, the inspiration that have come to me, which, I started with these revelations here, these messages. Our science reveals God's methods. The key to meeting God's expectation of us is self-control, and diversity is His. As servants, we must honor His diversity. These things came to me maybe about 20 years ago, but now this is the culmination, because what I'm about to show you, based on my life experience, the journey that I have been on, being a software engineer, getting involved with robotics, it is now apparent that what science has basically ignored from the time of Sir Charles Darwin making those discoveries that culminated in theory of evolution, there is one part that is absolutely missing. The part, and this is why this book, the From Whence Cometh Intelligence, is really, I say, it is the corollary to the theory of evolution. What I want to show you here is that intelligence that we are building now, right, the AI that we are building now, is very analogous to what we see in living things. And when I say living things, I'm talking about plants and animals. Of course, they are much, much, much more advanced. But I want to show you that there are three components. There may be more, right? I'll talk about the transmission mechanism, but there are three components to intelligence that are absolutely critical. Without those three components, there is no intelligence in any form, whether in life or in our machines. The three components are memory. We need memory because to make comparisons, you have to have something that you compare to. And the actual process of making those comparisons happens in memory. We all have memory. We know that pets, etc., they know us because they have memory. So now, because we are not at a stage where we can distinguish where and what is the memory in any living thing, but this again is scientifically, we are not there yet, but we know that there is memory in living things. Okay. Now, when I talk about this intelligence, I try to stay away from us as human beings, because people start conflating, learning and intelligence. I want to talk about intrinsic intelligence, the part that is not learned. This is what we see in birds that build nests. This is what we see in the behavior of insects like ants, right? They do not observe anyone, but they have that intelligence. They know, right? We see it all around us, even in plants. And if you have the time, take a look at that video. It's online, it's everywhere, In the Mind of Plants. But so to get back to those three critical components, one is memory. We absolutely need memory for comparisons, for making, because we know what a plane looks like, we know what a car looks like. You take someone from an uncontacted tribe, for instance, they would not know these things. It's not in their memory. Okay? So we need memory. The other critical part that you must have would be processors. You need some intelligence, some method, right, that to compare, to process the information. So you need processors, and the processors have to be, real time. It has to get, this information has to be processed immediately. You can't have a delay of seconds and minutes. It has to be a fast processor. And so with our AI, this is what we are implementing. And then, so you have to have that processor. And we would say, again, go back to human beings and say, it's a brain. No, it does not have to be a brain. Because as I will show you in a minute, with plants, there is no brain, but there is a processing system. When you think about a fetus, an egg that gets fertilized, there is no brain, but there is processing that happens that directs the development from the one cell and two cells, and it starts dividing. There is something that's guiding this. That's processing. That's intelligence. But let me get to the third component that is absolutely, and this is, again, it's a critical component, but it demonstrates you cannot have intelligence without something building it. The third component are the sensors that are involved. You see, all decision making are based on some sensory, and again, I'm talking about this intrinsic intelligence. You must have some sensory input, and based on that, the decisions are made. For instance, with us, or with, let me take it to the plant now. We all know you put a plant by the window, right, and the sun is outside, that plant turns to what, because it needs the sunlight for photosynthesis to create food, it turns towards that light. So what that demonstrates right there are sensors that is recognizing that the light is coming from this direction. So you must have sensors. The sensor is then sending in that information. That information is transmitted somewhere to the processing center, which then dictates the growth, because the plant has to grow, it has to create cells, it has to manipulate cells so that it turns towards the light. So we see there the sensors being involved, the transmitting of that information to some processing, which then directs the activities that follow. We see this, and I like to refer to the corolla spider. If you look at some of my other podcasts, you will see where I talk about this corolla spider. This is a spider that it digs a hole, and it uses quartz crystals. So it has sensors that indicates, and it has memory also, because that has to make that comparison that this that I'm now encountering is a quartz crystal. It then takes that quartz crystals and put it around the hole, attaches web from that quartz crystal and stands on it so that it can detect the vibration from by size and intensity, whatever, so it knows this is a possible prey animal and gets its food. Well, think about how many sensors are involved there. One very important thing about sensors, you cannot build a sensor unless you understand the purpose, what that sensor has to detect. So if you're building a sensor for light, like the plants have, you cannot have a sensor that is listening. It has to respond to light. So the designer of the sensor must understand the source of the stimulus. So whether you're designing for hearing, you have to understand sound. Because with us, that range of hearing, right? Other animals have a much larger, better capability to get a much larger frequency range. Same with light. There's UV light, there is the visible light, there's also infrared, and different animals are able, they have sensors that are designed. So the designer of the sensor must understand, So you see that takes us, and so that takes us into something where it's like, for the memory, the processing, and the sensor is critical, because without the sensor, you can't make intelligent decisions. You have to see something, respond to it. That's where the intelligence, so all three. There's also the transmission part, right? Because from the sensor to the processor, right? And then the processing and memory, right? You need all of these things, and they have to be in sync. The processor has to be real time. It has to, and we know in every living thing, you may be getting multiple. So when we think about, autonomous driving, that sort of thing, where you have, GPS sensors, and you have all these light sensors, LiDAR, and whatever else you have, but the processor has to be fast enough to process all of these things to make an intelligent decision. It has to be able to do this simultaneously. It's getting input from all of these sensors. And each of these sensors demonstrates the creator of that sensor had an intimate knowledge of that stimulus. So whether it's a light sensor, so something sees or hears, or vibration, whether just being, gravitational, whatever this plant or animal senses, it has the sensors for that. There must be a designer of every one of those sensors. There must be a designer that built this system, that incorporated the memory, the processing, the real-time processing capability, as well as all the sensors and the transmission mechanism that brings that all together. So when we see something that's simple, now we as human beings being logical, the entire process, the theory of evolution, we observe certain processes and we recognize, yes, things evolve. But that all of evolution is logical. All of it. We don't see any relics of just random, something just says, we look at viruses, we look at even unicellular organisms, paramecium, amoeba, their activities, we can observe. There is a logic. It does not just go in every, it has to say, this is something I can consume, this is something I want to get away from. They have sensors, processing, and that processing has to happen in memory. So as human beings, we are not there yet. Our science is, our modern science probably, 500 years old, from the establishment of the periodic table, and being able, so we move from, alchemy into understanding the modern makeup of our materials around us, the theory of evolution, all of these things, it's fairly recent. So when going forward, if we had billions of years, maybe we'd be building those kind of sensors. Maybe we would be building those kind of processors, real-time processors, right? And embedding the logic that where we don't have to tweak it. This is what we talk about with our system. We talk about machine learning. We have these large databases of information that it can reference, and then it can add it on its own. See it? This is where we see evolution. It's like you have different, and again, if you get a copy of the book, get a copy of From Whence Cometh, Intelligence, you get a copy of it. I delve a little bit, and again, it's all theoretical at this point, but it's logical. We observe the way science evolves, and it is that we observe certain things, then we strive to explain, and it has to fit. Okay, so in time, currently we may not have empirical data, but we accept psychology and psychiatry. There's a whole lot of empirical data missing there as well. This is logical. We observe these processes, and they cannot be refuted. This is irrefutable that we need three things that work together. We need memory, we need the processing capability, and we need sensors. And sensors alone, sensors is just a giveaway. That it must be designed by there must be an intelligence designing the sensor, because that intelligence must understand whether it's light, sound, vibration, gravitational forces, whatever. That must have an intelligence source to design a sensor so that whether it's a plant, a worm, a fly, a mosquito, it can detect. So in order to detect, there must be a sensor built, and the builder of that sensor must understand what is going to trigger that sensor. We understand this. I mean, is that clear? Our eyes does not listen. The eyes are built by something that understood light and says, your range of vision will be, from certain frequency to this frequency. This is why we see visible light. We have animals that use, we have bats and dolphins, and we have animals like, that live underground. They don't need that visible range. Well, of course, the bats and dolphins may have that additionally, but there may be animals that live in total darkness. They don't need that range. They have sensors that were designed, right? Because unless these animals are designing this themselves, in which case we should be able to design I would love to have the vision of, one of these felines where I can see at night, and the hearing, because we are more intelligent, quote unquote, than all of them. So what we see is that there is a designer of the sensors. Sensors are a dead giveaway to intelligence, because in order to design sensors, you must understand what has to be detected. So I want you to think about this, and do me a favor. Take this and send it out, because this is why I have this world unity, right? Our science reveals God's methods, and science has to recognize this critical part, because back in 1859 we didn't understand intelligence. We weren't trying to do AI, right? And again, my path from this little guy born in a village, doing, getting involved in software engineering for all these years, and robotics and all this, and now pulling all this as a servant, serving him. This is the information that can change this world, will change this world. We don't know when, but if you do your part, that's why I need your help. I need you to bookmark this, send it out, get the discussion going. I want to get a symposium as well, where we can talk about, the foundation of intelligence that we can observe in every living, not the learning process that we are involved in. I'm talking about that intrinsic intelligence. We can pick any creature, any creature at any level, from plankton all the way up, to ourselves. When I talk about this intrinsic intelligence, where we talk about in us, where we don't mess with it because we are born with it. Our digestive system, our immune system, those are excellent examples of intrinsic intelligence within us, because we don't tell that what to do. Those systems are built, they have their own sensors, right? They can detect whether it's chemical or whatever. They've been around, and so we can't have some human like myself taking credit for, well, I designed that. No, those systems, our immune, the training, the machine learning, all of these things, it's been designed. The sensors are there so that they can sense that this is foreign, this is something that I need to attack and to pull. So there is you see, this, it's one of the things that I say, all intelligent activities, all are directed by logic. All intelligent activities are directed by logic. The activities of our immune system, our digestive system, all of these things. And we look throughout. It is what's missing from the theory of evolution. We see logical, mutations. All mutations that we see, they are logical. They are no random. So this logical progression is directed by intelligence, and it does not have to be external. We know now that we can design things that based on sensors. And again, I go into From Whence Cometh Intelligence, my book. I describe how possible ways that these things can happen, where the activity that are detected by the sensors can cause the processing to realize that something needs to be changed. And so that whole process, which leads to a mutation and successful mutations that then become, which is what we observe. So this entire thing, the three part about memory, processing, and the sensors explains the logical part of the theory of evolution. It's a corollary to what Sir Charles Darwin did, recognized and wrote about in 1859. But this brings everything together, because it asks the question, from whence cometh this intelligence? Who designed the memory, the processors, and the sensors? And just look around. You can look at any animal. You can recognize they've got all kinds of sensors, many of which we may not have, we have not recognized as yet. Things like when there are disasters and animals act a certain way, well, it's possible they have sensors that pick up on these things. Our feelings, many of the things that we encounter that currently can't be explained, may be due to sensors within us. So it's important. I would love that you would be part of this. You would be part of things that in the next centuries, millennia, they'll be referring to. This was the part that was missed in 1859, because they weren't there. They were not conscious and aware of intelligence as a separate attribute to every living thing. I want to thank you for taking the time for viewing this, and remind you that this is not a coincidence. You made conscious decisions that led you to this. And so please take it along and be part of this fundamental change to our civilization. I want to thank you once again, and as always, until next time, may God bless us all. Thank you.